Where is he?
What?
Where is he?
Who?
Cairo.
What do you think you're doing, Jack? Kidding me?
I'll tell you when I am. New York, aren't you?
Shove off.
You're gonna have to talk to me before you're through, Sonny. Some of you will. And you can tell the fat man I said so.
Keep asking for it and you're gonna get it. Plenty. I told you to shove off. Shove off.
People lose teeth talking like that. If you want to hang around, you'll be polite.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Bricked Pit, the podcast you didn't know you didn't need. I'm your host today, Jason, and joining me is Josh.
No intro? I mean...
No, I'm not doing the complicated intro because we have a guest today, man.
Just when you think he's going to zig, there he goes.
That's right, man. Well, I am Josh.
Hold on, I need to take some ibuprofen or something here. Hold on. All right, and also with us is the other co-host, Adam.
Hello.
And as I mentioned, which I was going to keep it a surprise, but Josh ruined it, we have a guest today. Everybody welcome Patrick to the show.
Good morning, everybody.
And Patrick, you're from another podcast, Vintage Video. Would you like to tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. Vintage Video is, we just started our 5th year. We are reviewing every theatrical release of the 1980s in chronological order. So we're done with 1980 and 1981, and we just started 1982. So it's going to take us like 5 years to cover 1982 by itself. And then we'll die somewhere in the late, 1987s.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's took you 5 years to get the 2 years.
Two moves, yeah. The first year we did 1980 in its entirety because it was like pandemic year, so we could just do every movie on its actual anniversary. But then the second year we were like, this isn't gonna work long term. We can't do 3 or 4 episodes a week. So let's slow down.
Yeah.
There must be some kind of comfort knowing what you'll be doing on your deathbed, like having that already.
or is it like a threat where it's like, I have to finish the show. I have to like live until I'm 120 to just get it done.
Be on life support making a podcast.
I will say that your podcast is one of the few that I actually listen to. I barely listen to our own show, but I listen to yours.
I can't get my co-hosts to listen to our show. So.
Yeah, I have similar issues. But there's 2 things that like I just absolutely love. If you haven't listened to his podcast, like first you can hear Patrick has a great voice, and on the more absurd, like really bad films, as he narrates the plot, it just makes me laugh. Like the more absurd it is, because he's so deadpan. Like, well, then the severed hand crawls down the hallway, and it's incredibly entertaining. And then you have the whole bit, remember the last time.
Right, yeah.
And it's always something like incredibly, like, you remember the last time there was a monster's head in the toilet? And and somebody will say, oh, yeah, that was Ghoulies University. And somebody else will be like, no, that was the Grapes of Wrath. You're like, that's right.
Right.
But it's always like, I'm like, how many, like, they'll start just naming 5 or 6 movies that I have like something absurd, like a monster's head in the toilet.
Yeah, we've been trying to make like video content of that stuff lately, and it's been well received. So it's a fun game we've been playing.
Yeah.
I've kind of gone through, I haven't listened to 5 years worth of podcasts.
It's a commitment for sure.
Yeah, I've gone through and I've hit some, because there's one, it's like, when I found out, when Josh told me, it's like, yeah, they're doing every movie. And I was like, I've got to check, because there was a movie that Josh and I have like this field of movies that we don't know if they actually existed. Or if they're like some crazy fever dream, like, because we're like the only people, because they're these obscure movies.
I know exactly what you're going to say, too.
I don't think you do. So there's a movie that for years, I remember seeing on TV as a kid, and it was only maybe a couple of years ago that I actually found out exactly what it was. but there was a scene in it that just embedded in my mind. And I went, and you guys covered it, and it's actually like Tom Hanks' first movie.
Oh, He Knows You're Alone.
Yeah, there you go.
That's a good one.
I didn't know where you're going.
Exactly.
I'm trying to think of what scene is embedded in your memory. I'm guessing it involves a fish tank, maybe?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Like the previous scene of like the girl with the headphones on.
Yeah.
Smoking what I thought was a cigarette at the time when I first saw it, but then
So innocent.
yeah, and with her listening, and then like the knife coming around and slitting the throat, and then yes, the next one was her head in a fish tank.
Yeah.
Just a
One
very...
of 3 or 4 heads in fish tanks we've covered on the show. Literally, we have He Knows You're Alone had one, Eyes of a Stranger had one, Night School has one. And I think there's maybe a 4th one, but yeah.
You're going to have such deep arcane knowledge about things that when you get to the end of your life, your great grandkids will come around and be like, "Tell how many heads are in fish tanks in the 1980s." You'll be able to recall all of them.
Well, He Knows You're Alone is definitely the worst looking of the bunch. It just looks like they put a head-shaped cake in a fish tank.
That's what Josh looks like in real life, actually.
Yeah. I always win. Is it cake or not?
Nope, it's me.
It's just my lumpy head.
All of our previous guests thought that was a filter. It is not.
Yeah. Patrick has probably done more research for this episode than all of us combined. So
for any
I'm
episode
excited.
we've ever done, ever combined.
That's
I'm beginning to actually get worried that we're going to lose our own podcast. He's just going to take over.
Anyway, next week we'll be talking about.
Or he'll quit listening once he sees how the sausage is made. That's right.
I mean, say that only means our numbers go up.
That's fair. Yes.
Just
As long as
taking
those
the reins.
royalty checks keep coming in, I don't care what happens.
You guys are getting paid?
we're into the dozens of dollars now.
Oh my gosh. Very cool.
Adam's mom sends us a check every month to be his friend. That's separate from the podcast.
She just keeps thinking it's his birthday.
That's right. This will help you with your little internet show.
What did you just say? Because I think it has a different connotation.
Is your mom your only subscriber to your OnlyFans? That's messed up.
It's just me reading Bleak House out loud.
I'll pay you to stop.
This should not exist anywhere.
Hey, what are we talking about this week, Jason?
No idea. No. Today we decided to talk about a genre, and it's also kind of a debate amongst many cinema historians and theorists, if it is a genre, but I think it is, so that ends the discussion right there. But we've talked about it like in passing. We've made reference to it, and we've kind of talked about some films that kind of butt up against the edge and everything, but we really want to talk about the film noir genre, or as the French say, film noir. That's an authentic French accent right there. Yeah.
I thought you said cat noir, so I watched like 3 seasons of Miraculous.
Yeah. Simply the best.
I thought that was going to land with the parents in here.
I got it.
No, we've had that on here before.
I thought that up last week.
That's the only preparation he's done for this podcast.
Oh, I got one other chambered.
Film noir kind of gets really solidified in the 1940s and everything. That's when the French critics really kind of started defining it, and it's really a kind of sense of a bit of bleakness and everything to it. Usually there's some sort of crime involved. What we mostly think about when we think film noir are like the detective stories of, Sam Spade and Philip Marlowe. And those are big influences, the writings of Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler. And we will definitely talk about some of their adaptations in this as well. There's a lot of people that just don't really think it's a genre, and it wasn't called that at the time. They were melodramas. That's all they were. But there are some things that really kind of solidified them together, and there's a through line of some of their tropes. You generally have a MacGuffin of some sort.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's generally crimes or a criminal element surrounded, usually either theft or murder, and it's dealing with a lot of greed or crimes of passion. Very convoluted storylines.
Yeah.
In this, especially in the Raymond Chandler ones, there's things that kind of break up the narration or the narrative, and it could be a voiceover narration, flashbacks, things that give it kind of almost otherworldly or dreamlike quality to them, and shadows, lots and lots of shadows.
Those pesky Germans infecting our films with their shadows.
I always thought up until about 9th grade or so, because my only experience with the word noir came from Guy Noir, Private Eye on Prairie Home Companion. And so I thought that it was, I knew he was parodying movies, but I thought he was parodying like slapstick comedy movies. So it wasn't until I was in high school and I was watching, started picking up film as like a hobby, that I was like, oh, this is not at all what I thought what noir meant.
Well, I think some of what we should talk about is like the reason the French kind of picked up on this was like post World War II, when they got an influx of American films that they had, because they were busy. They didn't watch, watch a lot, so they binge watched a lot of American movies after they finished their little war, and they noticed these.
Or we finished that war for them, really.
Right. I mean, let's not get political. But they noticed all these kind of darker themes in American films that weren't particularly picked up on in the States, because it was, kind of living in the moment kind of thing. And there's certainly the flight of filmmakers from Germany in the 30s, and then kind of post-war disillusionment is I think a big part of the aesthetic, if not the content of film noir films. I just wanted to, throw that out there.
See, Mom, that film degree pays off.
That's right. I took a whole class on this. It cost my mom a lot of money for me to say that sentence.
30 years later, we're all still paying for it. That's
inflicting the damage on the next generation. Generational trauma from film school.
Noir films that can do, like I said, the private detective films, probably the ones we think of most, but there's also police procedurals. There are heist movies, which we'll see those on, some of our picks here. I think a lot of times, even though it gets into a lot of gritty stuff, a lot of social issues, sometimes, of course, there's mostly made in the 40s and 50s, so there's Hays Codes, and they kind of had to get around a lot of those things, but they did them very deftly when they could.
Yeah.
Because you had a lot of erotic and sexual connotations that the Hays Codes wasn't happy with. Yeah.
Yeah. With the sexual stuff, they always have to just hint at things. They can't say stuff blatantly. And I feel like the hardest rule with the Hays Code to overcome is that you can't portray criminals as being sympathetic. So many of these films, they end up, they can't win. They can't succeed in the end. And that was enough to calm the censors. But that was a lot of suicides at
the end of these movies. A lot of bad guys often
or they're
themselves.
dead in the first shot, and then we're going back a few days.
Yes. And there's also a lot of, especially when they're adapting material from books, Raymond Chandler had a lot of, and Dashiell Hammett as well, had characters who were clearly homosexual.
Right.
In the material. And of course, they couldn't portray that on the film, so they had to just slightly hint at it.
Lavender perfume on the handkerchief and stuff. Yeah, but the one thing they couldn't chain with the Hays Code was the pure sexual magnetism of Peter Lorre.
Right.
That may just be personal opinion, but
Josh has to pause it like 3-4 times just to regain his composure before he continues with the film.
he gives me the vapors.
So just dabbing his head with a handkerchief. Oh my, Mr. Lorre with your exotic accents. And there's also a lot of violence, a lot of cruelty from the characters in these films. Also, just almost a sense of ambivalence from a lot of characters about other people's situations and all that. But at the same time, a lot of these movies also have a sense of humor. It's usually a dark sense of humor.
Yeah.
It really definitely comes out in the pattern, the dialogue. Is very rapid fire and witty a lot of times and full of slang and everything. I think that's another defining aspect of these films. You see that influence really take over. Like, so they didn't call it film noir at the time. That they really kind of started accepting that in the 70s. And you can see a lot what is now called neo-noir. A lot of films that kind of copy that aspect and everything. And things, of course, like, Lawrence Kasdan's Body Heat, Blade Runner.
Yeah.
The Big Lebowski itself is a comedy of film noir, and it has a lot of aspects of these movies that we're going to talk about. It's especially influenced by Raymond Chandler's writing. Like, that's literally what they said they wanted to do. They wanted to make a nonsensical mystery or a crime movie like a Raymond Chandler novel.
Yeah.
So a lot of my favorite movies now are neo-noir or dystopian neo-noir specifically. And
that's a mouthful.
Yeah. But they all trace their lineage back to these earlier films. And it's really cool to kind of, I haven't watched a lot of these noir movies in a long, long time. And so coming back to them and kind of seeing how they informed some of my favorite movies and I know you made the joke about the shadows, but a lot of Blade Runners, a lot of it's shadows, right? A lot of the filming is the darkness of it.
Well, it's not just the darkness. If you look at the costuming and the hair, and everything,
it's very 1950s.
Yeah, very late 40s, early 50s.
Yeah, it's all single lighting setups because they were rationing lights for the war,
right?
So they just couldn't they couldn't spend on lights.
And there's also a point in the late 40s and early 50s where there's kind of a change with new technology, but also there was an influence from European film coming in, like especially Italian neorealism,
right,
where there was a lot of location shooting. And so you see that starting to happen in noir films as well. And we'll talk about that in some of these films that we hear, like some of the earlier ones, like Double Indemnity and Big Sleep, were mostly shot in studios and backlot. Double Indemnity does have a little bit of location shooting, but later ones in the 50s, they went out actually in towns in San Francisco and LA and actually shot on the streets, influenced by the Italian films coming in. And there's really great, just kind of feeding off of each other of, a lot of foreign films started taking noir aspects. You see it in Kurosawa's Stray Dogs and stuff like that. And it's a very influential genre.
Yeah. I mean, I think its legacy is obviously with neo-noir stuff, but it was a pivotal trend, even if you don't want to accept it as a genre. It certainly influenced most everything coming after it, if not just for the references like Guy Noir on Prairie Home Companion, famously.
Which opened up a whole world of information for me as we listened on Saturday nights. So.
Well, you'll still see it, even in commercials and stuff like that. If you hear that jazz, soundtrack and the voiceover and all that kind of stuff, people might not understand that that's a film noir reference, but it's so embedded in our culture. It's a recognizable.
And we've talked in the past about how there's kind of the actual trend and then the kind of cultural manifestation of that, Jim Kirk in Star Trek versus how he's portrayed in pop culture and how that becomes kind of the thing. But it's largely uncorrupted. I don't know if because the themes are literally black and white, but
Take a bite out of crime.
Yeah, but even the kind of like surface level parody is pretty spot on. I guess it doesn't take much. It takes a woman, a detective, and death, and then got yourself a film noir soup there.
But there's also like a lot of action comedies that, like we already mentioned Big Lebowski, but like in the 80s you had films like Big Trouble in Little China or The Golden Child, where I mean, The Golden Child was originally supposed to be more of a straightforward detective story until Eddie Murphy was attached. But his name is literally Chandler in the film on purpose because of the Raymond Chandler influence.
That's blowing my mind. That's
called research, Josh.
I'm sorry that The Golden Child didn't show up in my film noir research.
Neo noir.
I'll have to revisit that now with new eyes. It's interesting.
You need to get a refund on that deposit from that film school there, Josh.
It was a mail-in thing, so I don't. Okay. It's in the back of a Rolling Stone. Said in $5, and they sent me a degree.
They didn't even send you actual movies; they just sent you like stills of the.
He put it in his ViewMaster.
Look at the stills in this order.
Look, if I went to Soviet cinema school, that would be legitimate.
There you go.
We don't have film. Let's just storyboard and call it a day.
I do want to point out, because we love to quote Roger Ebert whenever we get a chance on this podcast. Roger Ebert said the most American film genre, because no other society could have created a world so full of doom, fate, fear, and betrayal unless we're essentially naive and optimistic.
That's why he got paid by the word.
But I think that's a pretty good summation of film noir.
Historically, they say that Westerns and film noir are the two things that are our cultural imprint. Like those are that are uniquely ours, that are stolen and riffed on and, used in other cultures. But, who knows? I ain't no Roger Ebert.
Well, so long ago,
Galaxy Far, Far Away?
Yes. No, a friend of mine, this is like filtered through many people, but I want to give some vague accreditation that this isn't my idea. Some professor somewhere said that all the great American art forms are corruptions of higher art. Jazz, comic books, and movies are all basically corruptions of the novel, I guess, symphonic music and storytelling. And it's kind of like, that's the American imprint. So it tracks that noir would be in that, we're a very doom and gloom society. We cause a lot of problems and then go, oh my God, look at all these problems. How could this possibly have happened?
Oh my God, it's the consequences of my own actions.
Yes, and that's what's interesting is that, Patrick, you talked about the Hays Code and not allowing sympathetic bad guys, but that actually kind of plays into the genre, because typically someone does something bad, commits a murder, commits fraud or something, and in the end, they're our protagonist and they don't get away, so it becomes a tragedy of sorts. So the best way to write around that is to make it more Shakespearean.
I feel like there's also they use the loophole of a way to let you root for the bad guy without breaking the Hays Code is to imply or state specifically that he is being framed for whatever he's done. And so then suddenly we're allowed to root for this guy, even though he's running away from the cops or in some cases shooting at them, because we know he didn't do it.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, because of the Hays Code, because of the strictness of it, I think that's a reason why maybe film noir was so popular, is it because it butted up against that.
Yeah.
And it showed these things that were kind of taboo in the Hays Code, like sexually aggressive women and, just the amount of violence and, questionable morality and stuff like that. It was not, it's like if all you watch is Disney movies.
Right.
And then you're a teenager and you say, oh, there's other stuff. There's people punching and
Well,
people yelling and feeling. I kind of like this. I've never seen this before. This is interesting.
and it's more reflective of actual life because we've talked in the past again about like the 1950s perception, put forward by Hollywood and advertising and stuff versus the reality, and film noir kind of is more accurate in some ways because there is crime and violence and people that aren't doing things for the greatest good or are being
people
selfish.
Of duplicitous nature.
Yeah. People like me, I finally see myself in film when I watch film.
Basically, Philip Marlowe.
Yeah. I would certainly murder that guy so I wouldn't have to go to jail.
There's a lot of experimentation going on, too, in some of these things. Like one of the films which we're not going to directly talk about, but there's a film, Lady in the Lake. It's shot completely from the perspective of, well, not completely, but mostly there's a framing device where, of course, it's the voiceover narration. You're telling it in flashback. And the framing device is you meet the character, the private detective that's telling the story. And then the rest of the film is shot from his perspective.
Yeah.
So the only time you see him in the rest of the film is if the camera passes by a mirror or something like that. You see the character as he sees himself.
I feel like that barely gets reused because, especially in the case of Lady in the Lake, it's a deeply unwatchable movie. It's actually a pretty awful framing device, but it's like good for you guys for trying something new. But it definitely ranks last in my Marlowe.
Is it like hardcore Henry POV style? Or?
If it were like that, then it would be better because the pacing would be better. But It plays out like a regular 40s film. But you're just watching the wide shot from a guy's perspective, and you never see him. You just hear him talking.
It's just a master shot.
Yeah, exactly. It disconnects you from the film, which I think is the exact opposite of the intent.
Right. Yeah.
Of the choice to shoot it from first person.
So I don't know how much you've listened to our podcast, Patrick, but we've been told we are the Lady of the Lake of podcasts. So
that was our original tagline.
Yeah.
The whole show's in the first person perspective. You just didn't realize.
You listening are actually in the podcast. You just have nothing interesting to say.
We think these are rhetorical questions.
Right.
If Josh were to make a movie today, he would do it in the second person. So it's all you this and you that. That's even more unwatchable. So, it's the point you were making earlier about it being like the forbidden fruit of film. I think that still plays today. We've talked about like with any kind of, especially with action movie, there's always like the one-upmanship. It has to be more spectacular, more violent, more bizarre, more whatever. Even with horror films, it has the twist has to be even more egregious or whatever. And I think that like a universal thing going all the way back through movie is audiences want to see or feel something that's a little dangerous, right? Either societally dangerous or content dangerous or whatever. Not in every movie, right? Like we have Disney for a reason, but there's a place for these kinds of films, and there still is today, I think. And a lot of times that pushes into like the boundaries into like just crap film, like to your point, Patrick. So some of the things today that quote push boundaries are just deeply unwatchable. Like they're just bad.
It's like, all right, we figured out that didn't work. We weren't going to find that out until we tried.
Just because it's old doesn't make it good. Well, so the interesting thing, that you talk about the forbidden fruit. One thing that I really like about the genre is that it does. And not to get too highfalutin, but it does really stray into almost Shakespearean, Macbethian territory where especially when there's a murder, because it really delves into the psychology of the aftermath of and what that does to you as a person. And, typically your average person's not going to murder somebody. Hopefully, I mean, but so
we're like an exception, but generally,
bringing up the average here.
Yeah.
You get to safely explore those pretty dark themes, and even with the Hays Code and everything, like these films go to some pretty uncomfortable places, and I think that's what elevates the genre, because we are talking about, the psychological effects of violence and duplicity and lies upon lies, and how it weighs on you. So it's pretty universal theme, but it explores the darker nature of us all, because it's typically just a guy or a girl, they're just Joe Schmo, and then suddenly there's murder or mayhem, and shows that we're all capable of these things. It's almost like Intrusive Thoughts, the movie,
Right.
where you get to explore these things that are very taboo.
And that's also, I think, what fueled the popularity of 70s neo-noir, was that suddenly the Hays Code had been,
pulled back. Yeah.
It was
The floodgates are open.
The gloves were off suddenly, and you could portray the basest examples of these stories and take them to a much darker place, and people were like, "Oh my god, I need to get more."
There's actually a lot of remakes of film noir,
right? Yeah,
and where they actually included a lot of the stuff from the books that
was cut out,
originally could not be in there, because there's things in like The Big Sleep, it involves pornography,
right,
which was illegal back then, and so they had to essentially whitewash all the direct references of it and just hint at it. I do have to say, I loved doing the research for this film, or this podcast. These films are just great to watch. I've had so much fun just exploring these. I've seen everything on the list already, and watching them again it was still a great experience to rewatch these films.
There's a certain nostalgia quality to it too. There's just so much output film wise today that it's kind of hard. And I've not seen every movie we're going to talk about today, but I've seen most of them at some point in my life. Only about 6 of them recently. But one of the things that I wanted to mention that was kind of stood out to me is, you kind of talked about the pacing, Patrick, of 1940s film in general, but these in particular have a different sort of vibe, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And one of the things I commented before the show to the guys was that I forgot how much a lot of these are almost like stage plays.
Yeah.
Because the actors are, in some cases, they overact, like especially the unknown names or the secondary characters. And I kind of I like that a little bit, that it's a little bit hammy, but you can actually see, like in some of the movies I watched, you can actually see people look down to hit their mark. Like you can see they're actually looking at the ground to make sure they hit their mark before they look at the camera and do their line or whatever. A lot of the set pieces, like Josh talked about, how there's a lot of back studio interior set pieces. A lot of the rooms in these are like tiny. Like the sets are super, super small, very minimalist decorations. There's not a lot of like props or stuff around. And if there is a prop, it's a very obvious prop that has like they're going to interact. Like it's like Chekhov's gun. Like if there's a calendar on the wall, you better believe he's going to go over there and look at the calendar, right? There's no like it's not going to go unnoticed, right? And or if there's a grandfather clock in the corner and it's chiming, well, that's probably important, So
that brings up kind of two things that I thought of. Is that one? It's just this era of film. It's funny that we haven't gotten to a lot of the kind of middle shortcuts. So like you see a lot of what we would see now is like superfluous, like booking rental cars, and everybody, they're like, hang on, we gotta call the airline. And like in today's film, they would just be at the next location. Right, you would just be like, they obviously,
that's funny.
There's a lot of business of getting places.
The thing is, like most audiences, it's like, well, obviously he booked a rental car, but then there's those people on the internet. How did he get there? He just left in the airport.
Yeah.
Like, so he just had cash on him? Didn't he have to go to the bank first and withdraw it? Well, you're right. Let's put another scene in there.
Like just a guy doing the stuff in between. It's like the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern of he's trying to get correct change for the bus, and there's like gunfights in the background.
Not only that, though, it's weirdly, especially with just film noir, but they show like the booking of the rental car, but in the next scene they're in a hot air balloon, and you're like, wait. and it's central to the plot because they're so convoluted. Like, you're like
I think that's one of the things I really love about it. Is just the plots are so convoluted. It's when you think you got figured out, it's like, oh, here's a double cross, and no, that guy's dead. Like, what's going on?
You can't be on your cell phone watching these movies. I learned.
No. You shouldn't be anyway. But but to your point of the acting style and stuff, I think what I miss, and I think what's a worrying trend to me in film today is the need for similitude, I guess, that everything has to be hyper realistic. And it's like these expectations aren't like if you go see a play, you're not going to be like, hey, wait a second. That's not a full house. Like
he would be wearing a coat inside.
Wait a minute, why are there people here watching this with me?
Yeah. So there's this drive to and floating around the internet, there's been this tale of old Samwise Gamgee, what's his name? Sean Astin asking, like, they're filming at night and he's asking where the light's coming from, and the director of photographer said same place the music is. And it's like that's this is an art form, it is a film, and that stylistic choices should, I miss crazy color in film and things that, it's like, because and I think that's why we like most films today, you're like, it's like
they're forgettable.
It's super dark because they're like, well, it's nighttime. It's like, well, put a light up. Like, I would like to see this.
I can just turn off my TV for 5 minutes and simulate this.
It's in a radio play.
Same with the sound mixing, because it's like I have like fantastic surround sound. I have it cranked all the way up on these new movies, and I still have to put the captions on. Like, I can't. I'm like, what did he? I can't understand.
There's an explosion that blows your ears out.
Exactly. Yeah. Fortunately, new technology kind of levels it all out. But man, it's crazy how they've just changed. Whereas, like in these old movies, there's a clear voice channel, there's a clear soundtrack channel, and there's a clear sound effects channel. At the time, people
didn't have such complicated like home video situations, so it's like they didn't have to account for varying living room scenarios.
Right.
But I do feel like more work could be put into mixing for the home video market and not just putting the theatrical mix in people's houses and having it be a complete mess.
Or at least give you better. Or it's not like they don't have. When everything was DVD, you could choose in a high quality film, you could choose your audio output. You
can do that on the Netflix,
but it only gives you like 2 choices, and neither of them are good.
I wish you could turn up volume for dialogue and special effects independently, so I could just literally turn up the dialogue.
Be awesome.
Yeah. Which like you could do it. It's just laziness,
Yeah.
So, but
Netflix
make sure
is like 5.1 or Esperanto.
Yes. or 2.8, and you're like, what? I've never even heard of that format. What is that?
8 subwoofers. It's like
two. Yeah.
We send a guy named Jim to your house to recite the dialogue for you.
He just whispers it from behind you.
But 2 doors away.
Or it's the soundtrack of the person that doesn't pay attention to the film. And they keep going, what's happening? Why is this guy here?
Is this the guy from the first scene?
It's the unique, the real theater experience is the chomping of the popcorn behind you and oh no, he didn't,
I might pay to have a track of that.
It exists. It's called Riff Tracks. You can just
fair point.
So, since you're our guest here today, Patrick, why don't you start us off with a movie pick?
All right. Well, I'll start with my Raymond Chandler pick, which was Murder My Sweet from 1944.
Want to make a statement? The boys tell me I did a couple of murders. Anything in it? I think you better let me have it. Bring in your book. If I hadn't been in my office that night when my brain cells playing hide and seek with those dizzy flashes down the street, I'd have never got messed up with a stolen jade necklace.
I've never hired a detective before. What are the rates?
As much as the traffic will bear.
When can you start?
I've already started. Well, this looked like something to rub your palms about. But my client's lovely stepdaughter had other ideas.
What did she ask you to do?
She wanted me to kiss her and find a jade necklace.
Whatever she was willing to pay you, I'll up it. Just stay away from her. Forget the whole thing.
It sounded screwy, but it's a funny thing. I always follow through on a sale, even if it pays dividends in a broken skull. I didn't see what hit me. I didn't have to. The first thing I knew, I found myself heaped on a bed like a bag of bones ready for the scrap heap. My throat was dry. My hands felt like a bunch of bananas. I couldn't stand on my pins. Okay, I said to myself, you're a tough guy. Let's see you get out of this straitjacket. Help! Help!
This is an adaptation of Farewell, My Lovely, which is the second Chandler Marlowe story. It stars Dick Powell as the character that obviously Humphrey Bogart made much more famous a couple years later. They changed the title from the book. The book was called Farewell, My Lovely, and they thought Lovely would get confused for like Cole Porter de Lovely, that it would be a musical because Dick Powell was in a lot of musicals. And so they were like, we're going to call it Murder, My Sweet, so it's clear that it's a detective story. I think they changed the title back when Mitchum did the remake in the 70s. But Dick Powell is actually one of my favorite, probably my second favorite Marlowe actor after, I think Elliot Gould is probably my favorite. I rank Dick Powell above Bogart even just because he is a little more intentionally comedic in this story. He has a lot of jokes and they're really solid jokes, which you don't expect jokes from 44 to work so well in the present day, but they're like, my kids would wander in and laugh at this stuff.
Yeah, his delivery is on spot for all of them.
He's really funny, and like we talked about before, the whole story's told in like as a flashback. It basically starts. Marlowe is sort of forcibly hired by a client who just got out of prison, and he's trying to locate an estranged girlfriend or ex-girlfriend who it seems like is trying to stay away from him, but he wants to find her. And then obviously there's other cases, and as often happens, all of Marlowe's cases sort of work their way together and become one huge entanglement. But yeah, I think there's a lot of really amazing camera work in this film too. There's inserts where he's remembering details on pieces of paper and the camera like floats across the room and zooms into text, and like black lines like close in around the one detail that you're supposed to pay attention to, and stuff you didn't see a lot of at the time. A lot of really creative, even effects work too. Like anytime he gets hit with a blackjack or something, like the screen is like animated blackout transition to like close in and fill the frame around him. And there's this whole like French Connection 2 sequence where he's been drugged by these criminals, and he sort of wakes up and there's like spider web over the lens. Like the whole scene is shot through this webbing, and he's just having these panic attacks in this room that he's locked in.
The black pool opened up at my feet again, and I dived in. Next thing I remember, I was going somewhere. It was not my idea. The rest of it was a crazy, coked-up dream. I had never been there before. Where's the necklace? The window was open, but the smoke didn't move. It was a gray web woven by 1,000 spiders. I wondered how they got them to work together.
But it just does some really interesting stuff with the camera, on top of being really well written and, like you said, really well delivered by Powell. He has very solid comedic chops in this film. This
is the only other place in my life I can think of that I've ever heard the name Velma is in this movie.
Yeah.
It's Scooby-Doo and this.
I feel like this was a big inspiration for the way that Elliot Gould would portray the character later, that he was like, I'm going to be a little more intentionally funny with it, because Bogart and Mitchum both played the character much straighter and
deadpan,
more serious.
And Bogart does have his comedic moments in The Big Sleep, but this one it's more a kind of a central part of the character.
Yeah.
I think Bogart had the acid tongue, I think, a lot more in his. And this one is a bit more playful with it. Yeah. So
Bogart is a little bit scarier from the outside.
Yeah.
I feel like Dick Powell is the guy who is like the approachable version of that character.
That's a good way to put it.
I would say there's this, when they go to like the beach house looking for clues and everything, like you see there's this beautiful matte painting of like this large, spacious beach house.
Right.
And they go inside, it's like a studio apartment.
Right.
Like
you close the door and the wall shakes.
It's just like this
same place
bed
from the
up on
outside.
this platform and everything. It's like, where's the rest of it?
It's in the painting.
Coming from the same place the music is.
You sound like one of those internet people.
That reminds me of when they do the opposite joke in, I think it's Loaded Weapon Volume 1, where he's got this like RV on the beach, and then he goes inside and there's like marble columns and like this huge like palatial bedroom. Just like, wait, what?
It's like it looks so big in here. I use light colored paint. I remember
Accent
that movie.
walls.
Yes.
It does everything.
Marlowe's been portrayed, more than a handful of times, but by different actors. And then, not as much as like Sherlock Holmes, but I think approaching that level, at least we have like different decades interpretation of the character. And some of them, like, in these noirs, it's like within years apart. I guess more of a Jack Ryan kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Bogart is kind of the, I guess, default in most people's minds, but his performance is, he's very John Wayne-ish in that, like, it's just Bogart. It's not.
Yeah, he's not playing a character. He's being himself in every Bogart movie.
Right. They just changed his name, but it's Bogart in The Big Sleep.
Right.
Versus, like you said, taking the character and taking the material and adapting it like a more character actor would do it. I've not seen Elliot Gould. I assume that's an 80s remake.
That's The Long Goodbye. It's late 70s.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have not seen it. I'll take it. I like Elliot Gould a whole lot.
That's probably my favorite Robert Altman movie. And him and Gould together are always great, but that in particular is my favorite of their collaborations.
On the list.
I think they even kind of rewrote the ending to make it even darker.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And on purpose, because I think Altman, like, he kind of I think he had it out for fans of the novel because they were so reticent already with his announced like directing of the film that he was just like, all right, you know what, I'm just going to make a movie that I want it to be, and I don't care if this feels like you're Marlowe, like this is what I want it to be, and actually I'm going to do like little things to piss you off on purpose because he just doesn't care. But the movie by itself, without looking at it, comparing it to the book or comparing it to previous incarnations of the character, I feel like it's just so well done and so like perfectly encapsulated all in one story. It feels like just a really wonderful character, the way Elliot Gould plays it, that he's just the most nonchalant, like laissez-faire guy.
It's also very interesting to consider the fact that, maybe there's a bit of a connection, the disillusionment of the late 40s compared to the disillusionment of the 70s.
Right, yeah.
And there's a very easy to update those kinds of stories.
Yeah.
Josh, why don't you give us films?
I will give you all of the films. So I want to talk about DOA.
Have a nice trip, Frank.
Sure, Kitty. See you when I get back.
Bon voyage.
I want to report a murder.
Who was murdered?
I was.
And not the 80. when I put this on our list, Adam texted me and he goes, the 1984 version, and I was like, dude, what do you think? What? Do you even listen to our show? So it's 1949 released in 1950. We had an offline conversation about when it was released. So
it's not the DOA volleyball video game then either?
I have a whole separate podcast on that. I have a Twitch channel.
Okay.
So, directed by Rudolph Bakay, it stars somebody that we'll probably talk about a lot today, Edmund O'Brien as Frank Bigelow, who in this is, I couldn't really clap what he was. He had a business. He was a businessman, I think. And it's very important that he was a notary public. But what I love about this film, it's a murder mystery, but the uniqueness of it is it's a man solving his own murder. Right. And so in the intro scene, he busts into the police precinct and says, I want to report a murder. And they say, oh, my God, who's been murdered? I have. You know, like,
Dun, dun, dun. Crazy accent that Josh threw in there for some reason.
That was my film noir talk. What do you? So the rest of the film was a flashback, and it is very much encapsulates all the tropes of a noir. There's a MacGuffin, there's a red herring, and essentially the plot is he's been poisoned with luminescent poison, which, by the way, is a real thing.
Yeah.
Because the film,
which we were told at the end of the film.
Yeah. Adam linked an article or
text me confirmed that it is a thing. Yes.
But for some reason, there's a title card at the end of the film. It's like, no, like this is a real poison. It's like, who cares?
Which is such a weird. Why? Just to divert for a second, but it is the reason I found that article because I also thought, what a weird thing to put at the end of the movie. It says Dr. Edward Smith, I attest that the luminescent poison is a real thing called something else. And I was like, why at the end? Why not? I mean,
it was to stop 1940s neckbeards from sending out telegraphs.
Getting on the telegraph being like, this is bull crap.
You have to go get a doctorate to find out if it exists.
It's just a weird. Anyway, sorry. That is one of the more unusual things.
So Frank Bigelow, he has a girlfriend who is 1940s movie star quality. For some reason, that's not good enough for him. So he decides to go to, San Francisco, I think, to find himself or go on vacation. And he's going to go cat around. There is something that has been talked about a lot. It's the elephant in the room in this film. Yeah. So he gets to the hotel. There's women everywhere, and I couldn't I was like, are they prostitutes or are they just loose women? Or are they
what is going on?
Right, like why? And they're all like leering at him. It's like hey, big
every
boy.
single one.
Right, and he'll gives them the big eyes. There's the slide whistle. They go woo.
Every time they show somebody good looking, it's so weird.
And so suddenly you're in
a cartoon.
You're in a screwball comedy, and it's been debated online endlessly. Like, why the hell would you do this?
Yeah.
But I feel like if you didn't have the framing device, it could have very well been worked and been like a From Dusk Till Dawn thing. Like, you think this is just a kind of light romp where this guy's going to realize he's in love with, and then all of a sudden he's poisoned. But then you put in the framing device where that's not the kind of story you're in.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're pretending it's not now. It's just,
well,
and it's so loud.
It's so out of place that I was sure that I was watching some adjusted version that somebody had put that in there as a joke. Yeah. And when I went and looked online, it's like, no, there's actually the opposite. Like, there are people who are like, hey, I finally made a version of this movie that doesn't have the stupid slide.
Yes. It's like cutting Jar Jar Binks out of the Phantom Menace.
Right. Yeah. There's a Topher Grace out there.
Also independently looked this up is comforting to me because as soon as it happened, I paused it and I was like, did I download the wrong version of this? And I was watching it in real time, and I was texting the guys about it. And I just said, "Holy cow, that slide whistle!" I was like, I've got thoughts.
That's too much.
Yeah.
Adam, do you not watch movies in real time? How do you watch movies?
What I meant to say is with Josh and you commenting with me, So.
He takes Spice and watches them in the future.
That's right.
No, he watches it in perfect real time. So if the character goes to sleep, he'll pause it and then
that is exactly what I do.
Day, whenever the character wakes up.
Stop drinking. I can't take anymore.
Those 2-year time jumps are hard on me. I'll tell you what.
Yeah, I've got a literal like $1 DVD version of TOA. So I also thought, I was like, oh, this is why it was $1. So I put in the slide whistle. It's funny that everyone went straight to the interwebs. I can only imagine 1950. Like, surely even back then, people were like, that's totally incorrect.
75 years later, people are still mad about it. That's how bad of a choice that was.
I would assume that was somebody's like text notification sound if it were happening now in a theater.
So back to the story. He goes out. This film ultimately is about the dangers of jazz music.
And white socks with brown shoes.
He goes to a jazz club, and I guess, what do they call it? It's an old funky term. But anyway, like, he even talks to the bartender about what's this crazy music. So I don't understand it. The kids today, they love it. There's this protracted sequence of like super close ups of musicians that have like crazed eyes. It's almost like the Moral Panic film about marijuana. You know,
Reefer Madness.
Yeah. It could have been lifted right from that. Like
Jazz Madness.
Yeah, it's making me crazy. So he gets poisoned with the luminescent poison. He wakes up, feels sick. He goes to the doctor. Doctor's like, "You're poisoned." He's like, "I'm getting a second opinion." And this is like the kind of getting a rental car thing. Like
we see three different doctors.
You've got a week to live, and the guy's like, "I'm going to another doctor in my hometown or whatever."
Yeah, I gotta wait for the test results, and there's like 20 minutes of him sitting by the phone.
Mr. Bigelow, this is Dr. Schaefer.
Hello, Doctor. How are you?
Sit down, Mr. Bigelow.
According to the information you gave Miss Wilson, you're not married, Mr. Bigelow.
That's right.
Do you have any relatives, family, anyone in San Francisco?
No one. I don't know a soul in San Francisco.
Where is your home?
What is this, Doctor? Why all the questions?
You're a very sick man, Mr. Bigelow.
Sick? But you told me I was in good shape.
Yes, I know. But my preliminary examination didn't reveal your true condition.
You sound as if it's pretty serious, Doctor.
It's extremely serious.
I want you to understand that we wouldn't tell you something like this unless we were absolutely certain.
Well, of course.
You must steel yourself for a shock, Mr. Bigelow.
Well, go on, Doctor. What is it you're trying to tell me?
Our tests reveal the presence in your body of a luminous toxic matter.
What is that exactly?
A poison that attacks the vital organs.
Poison?
We have no alternative but to tell you this.
Your system has already absorbed sufficient toxin to prove fatal.
I wish there was something that we could do.
What do you mean, wish? You mean there's nothing?
There is nothing anyone can do.
This is one of the few poisons of its type for which there is no antidote.
Well, this is fantastic. This is the most ridiculous thing.
You don't have very long.
What do you mean?
A day, possibly a week, 2 weeks at the outside. It's hard to say exactly.
Well, this is impossible. I don't believe it. You've made a mistake. That's it. It could be a mistake, couldn't it? You have made a mistake, haven't you? Answer me.
Dr. Schaefer is an authority on toxicology.
Been no mistake, Mr. Bigelow.
Do you realize what you're saying? Well, you're telling me that I'm dead. Do you think you can explain my life away in just a few words? Why, I don't even know who you are. Why should I believe you?
You must calm yourself, Mr. Bigelow. We want to offer you every assistance that we...
Assistance? Who wants your assistance? Who wants anything from you? You're nothing but a couple of phonies. Why, I think you're crazy. That's it. You're crazy. The both of you. You're crazy.
So he's been poisoned.
What's also funny to me is that both doctors immediately knew exactly what it was, and it was incurable based solely on this like simple blood test that they did.
The second doctor, he did tell him, yeah. I've got bioluminescent poison.
Well, the first doctor shows him like an X-ray, right? Of the bioluminescent poison. Somehow it shows up on an X-ray, and it just looks like a massive explosion in his intestines.
And then it glows in the dark for the second guy, which is the funniest bit. Like,
yes. I'm not a pathologist, but this tube for no reason. Turn out
which
the lights.
Implies this is so common that they're like, "Oh yeah, this happens all the time. You just look for this, glow in the dark blood. That's how you know."
He just points to the luminescent poster on the wall.
He had contact with Russian agents. So anyway, he tries to figure out what's happening, and he finds out that there is this business transaction that went down, and the only trace of it is that he had notarized the shipment. long story short, he goes and confronts the shipping guy, and the guy's like, no, but now that you know that, we're going to kill you. So he kicks an anthill for no reason. It turns out that one of the partners had killed the other partner because he was having an affair with the guy's wife, and they framed it as a suicide, and they set this was an illegal transaction up so he would have a reason to kill himself. And this is like probably the least convoluted of all these stories. And so basically he got killed to cover up a murder because he just happened to notarize something, which is another kind of like trope of noir film is like, yeah, well, wrong place, wrong time.
Accidental involvement and you're good as dead, basically. Yeah.
Right. The red herring being this shipping guy, like getting illegal, it was like iridium or something. It was like, so it seemed like, I don't even know what iridium does, but that sounds like commies are involved. So
yeah, this would definitely, if this were like a modern espionage story, this would definitely be polonium that they're doing the poisoning with.
Or it would have to do with Bitcoin. Like, because nobody knows what Bitcoin is. Just like Elon Musk is the bad guy. It's like
cyber AI coin is what it would be.
Yes. Notwithstanding the weird tonality of the slide whistle, it's a really enjoyable film. One of my favorite film noirs.
Edwin O'Brien does a real good job because, like, he's happy-go-lucky, carefree at the beginning, and then, like, you kind of feel his anxiety as the movie goes on, as the poisoning and everything, and then him just realizing he's on a ticking clock.
Yeah,
he does a really good job of it. He pulls you into this film very well. It's like Westerns. You have, like, big budget A-movie Westerns, and then most of them are like B movies. This is B movie. This is like, I think, independently produced.
Yeah.
It's actually is in the public domain because they didn't take care of the copyright aspect of it.
Which is why we got the great fan edits with no slide whistle.
It's also probably why it doesn't have like a decent Blu-ray because people are like, it can't be exclusive.
Right. What is interesting, like watching this film, like from 2024, is it's hard for me to get, like, is Bigelow supposed to be kind of a
jackass?
Is he supposed to be kind of a ne'er-do-well? Because, like, so it's like, is his misogyny and, like,
is that normal or is that
right? Is that like a Don Draper kind of thing? And people are like, yeah, that's exactly what a dude would do. Give that man a steak sandwich.
He's a notary, for God's sake. Of course, that's what he's.
Right? Or is it supposed to read this guy's kind of a ne'er-do-well? So
I don't know. The slide whistle does give him like a sort of a feel of like the cartoon wolf with the eyes popping out of the head.
Yeah. Any of our listeners from the 1950s, please
take care of yourselves.
We have some Geritol in the mail for you.
There's the bumper for this episode right there.
No, when I look at it, like, it's low budget, and they did location shootings in San Francisco and L.A.
And they go to the Bradbury Building.
Yeah.
Just,
cool.
But
they didn't have permits, and so a lot of this is shot guerrilla style. So there seems like Edmund O'Brien like pushing through like a crowd, and like people like look at him. That's not acting; those are just actual people on the street that he was bumping into. Yeah, a great movie, just a fun time. Slide whistle aside.
I give it one wolf slide whistle out of one.
Perfect.
I gotta check my sound. There's something wrong there. What is that coming from? All right, Adam, why don't you tell us your first pick?
So mine is the 1950 film The Asphalt Jungle, which is one of Marilyn Monroe's earliest movies.
Only the author of Little Caesar could tell so dramatic a story. Only the director of The Treasure of Sierra Madre could film it with such power. Only once in a decade does the screen come up with such absorbing characters. Sterling Hayden as Dix Handley, a hooligan with a twisted dream. Jean Hagen as Doll, the dime a dance dame who wanted to share that shabby dream.
Let me go with you. Please, Dix, please.
You're crazy. I'm on the lam. I want it bad, packing heat. If there's any trouble, what good would you be?
I could drive.
No, Doll. I'm wanted on a killing rap. You know what that means.
I don't care. I just want to be with you.
Louis Calhern as Emmerich, the big-time mouthpiece with crime on his mind.
Oh, I suppose a fella should stick to his own trade, but I know some pretty big men around here that might not be averse to a deal like this if they're properly approached. Highly respectable men, I might add.
Sam Jaffe as Doc. He's got $1 million in that little black bag, and a jitterbug cost him every dime of it. Marilyn Monroe as Angela, the easy-living, green-eyed blonde.
Haven't you bothered me enough, you big banana head? Just try breaking my door, and Mr. Emmerich will throw you out of the house.
James Whitmore as Gus, the strong-arm boy. A right guy in a wrong world.
Gus, come on! Bring on! You ain't close. You haven't seen him or anything. You're gonna wind up for your prerogative. You're gonna wind up in the morgue.
It's essentially a heist film. In doing a little reading on this, it's considered one of the earliest kind of heist planning genre movies. Again, talking about how like old stuff informs things that I like in the modern day, or even things that continue a kind of a through line. Like one of my favorite movies to watch with my wife has always been the Ocean's series of movies, the Ocean's 11, or whatever. Yeah. The originals with Sinatra, but the new ones too. And they all kind of have this like wonky planning scene where they're all like, we're going to do this and we're going to do that and you're going to be here. And, and that everything that comes has sort of originated from this era of heist movies. And this is one of the best examples in that sort of subgenre of subgenres, I guess. But the gist is it takes place in like a Midwestern city. This guy's fresh out of prison. He's a well-known, he's the Danny Ocean, if you're wanting to continue with my analogy there. He's the well-known planner. That's his big benefit is he's really good at meticulous planning.
But he's not George Clooney or Frank Sinatra.
No, he's not good looking in that way anyway, for sure. And also doesn't have the screen presence of either of those. But nevertheless,
how is he good looking? In what way, Adam?
in his old Eastern European charm is. Actually, I think he's German, right? So, in any case, the idea is he's just got out of prison and he's trying to round up a crew to do a bank robbery, or it's a jewelry store robbery. I'm sorry. He needs a box man, which is like a safe cutter. He needs a getaway driver, and then he needs some muscle. And so he goes to like a local bookie to try to round up these guys. And the plot twists in this are all about who's financing the job. So there's like a local lawyer who's like big name in town, and he's very, very wealthy. And it turns out that he kind of on the side does stuff like that. Like he'll finance these jobs. But the plot twist is he's also actually secretly broke. And his wife is like bedridden and sick in some way. So his side piece is Marilyn Monroe, who he keeps in a cabin out in the woods as like a thing.
Like a gimp?
No, quite not. Weirdly, she keeps calling him uncle, which is weird.
Yeah. She says he liked it at first too, because he's like, "Can you not call me that?" And she's like, "That you told me."
But you used to like it, yeah. That's so. I was like, that's something.
I'll take things that haven't aged well for 200.
I don't think it was meant to be well received back then.
Yeah. Fair point.
That reveal happens even before you figure out like he's the bad guy. Is it kind of sets up that there's A, he's philandering, but B, there's this really weird relationship between him and Marilyn Monroe that's like, even outside of like a normal affair, is kind of like, whoa. It just doesn't feel right. Yeah. And I do think that was an intentional choice. And man, Marilyn Monroe is like super, super young in this too. Like,
yeah. She's not in much of it though, which is interesting.
It's very small. Like, yeah, just two real big scenes and then like a couple of smaller scenes. So the gist of it is this guy's got to get this crew together and he needs this lawyer to finance it. And the lawyer's idea is he's going to double cross these guys as soon as he gets the jewels. He's going to claim that he has a fence, but he's really going to abscond with the girl and the jewels and get out of town. The other side of it that's fun, it's a trope that continues in other heist movies, even to the current day, is you could be the best planner in the world, but you can't always account for serendipity or just chaos theory.
Everything's here. The soft spot's an old steam tunnel. Manhole's on the corner. You drop into the manhole at 11:45. Dix will cover you. You break through the wall. It'll take about 6 minutes to get into Belletier's from the furnace room. Watch out for floor wires. Make your way up the back stairs and jump the alarm system. That'll take another 3 minutes. At exactly 11:54, Dix and I will come to the back door. You open it for us.
I'll be waiting for you.
Good. Any questions?
Everything sounds okay?
Same here.
Well, guess I better be getting home.
How's the boy?
Oh, he's okay. Ran a temperature yesterday. Pretty high, too. We called the doctor, but temperatures don't mean so much with kids. He's back to normal today. See you tomorrow night, 11:30.
Good night. Have you got a minute, Dix?
Sure, what's on your mind?
My friend, what do you know about this fellow Emmerich?
You mean the big fixer? I've heard his name, that's all.
I can talk to you, I think.
Sure.
Mr. Emmerich is taking the jewelry off our hands.
You sure are surprising me, Doc.
I don't exactly trust Mr. Emmerich. Just a feeling. I may be wrong, but it's up to us to collect, you and me. Everything may go smooth, but if it don't...
If he's got it, we'll collect.
Good. We'll meet Mr. Emmerich after the caper, deliver the jewelry, and get our money. The payment is to be immediate and in cash.
What we see is that they do a really, really good job of portraying this kind of, in a subtle way, is the mastermind in the movie. His name is Doc. They call him Doc.
That's the Sterling Hayden character.
Yes, that's correct. And
no. Sterling Hayden is he's what Dix, I think is his name.
Yeah, that's Dix.
Yeah, Doc is the small older man who plans everything. Yeah, Dick
Sterling is the muscle.
Is the muscle? Yeah.
Is it which one plays Doc? Now I'm gonna have to look it up.
Sam Jaffe, I think.
Sam Jaffe. Yeah. There are bad things that happen accidentally in the heist. Like a guard just happens to be walking by at the wrong time. And then when he's on the lam, they stop at a diner and there's a pretty girl dancing. And so he pays for her to have more time on the jukebox. And it was like that one extra song was enough time for the cops to find him. And he makes a point of like, how long have you been waiting out there? Oh, about 3 or 4 minutes. And he goes, about the time of one song. And so like he can plan everything to the last minute, but you can never account for just weird things happening and kind of throw off the plan.
They foreshadowed that because when he stops to talk to the bookie and the bookie takes Dix out because Dix shows up to pay off his debt, Doc goes up and there's a pinup girl calendar and he's flipping through the calendar looking at the pictures because he just got out of jail.
Right. He's into the women. So anyway, it culminates with basically the muscle gets shot. The safe cracker gets shot. The bad guy who's with Marilyn Monroe kills himself. Like it's just everybody dies, and it's all
the Hays Code kills everyone.
Yeah, basically that's how it all ends. And then there's a press conference which tidily brings it all together. At the end,
like the last 2 minutes.
Yeah, this is how it all works out.
What I love about it is though, because they go through and they like give the connections on every like the guy who drives the car. He actually runs this rundown lunch counter.
Right.
That Diggs comes in because he's just done something and he hands the guy his gun and he puts it in the register and the cops can we search the place? Well, we can with the warrant, And so there's a connection there and he then calls the safecracker to borrow money so Diggs can pay off his debt.
Right.
And then you find out that dude's got a wife and a newborn kid and all that, and that's when he's going to die.
Right.
Because they put a lot of emphasis on his family.
We never see the families of the people who survive.
That's right. And the cameraman never dies. That's the other. It's funny. You brought me back to a point I wanted to make, which was that this is also like So the guy, you're right. The cops come in, they're going to tear this place apart. And he's like, you're going to need a warrant for that. And the guy says something to the effect of, I don't need a warrant to crack your skull or something like that.
I don't think a judge would give you that. You're correct.
What's the 50s?
But there's a lot of that in a lot of these movies where the cops are like almost just as bad as the bad guys. Like they'll just, they'll just beat you with a blackjack for no reason at all, So.
Yeah.
That's not limited to the 50s.
Yeah. What Josh is trying to say is some things never change.
So the wheelman Gus is actually played by James Whitmore, who's got a very long and storied career, but most of our generation will know him from The Shawshank Redemption. He plays Brooks, the old man. That
he was here.
Yeah. Hayden Sterling, most of us remember from Dr. Strangelove.
Right, yeah.
As the Air Force general who caused the whole thing. So it's got a really good cast in here.
What is his name? Jack the Ripper or Jack T. Ripper or something like that?
Yeah. Well, all the name conventions in there,
You have Colonel Bat Guano.
Yeah.
President Merkin Muffley.
This is a very, again, shot on location, so it's a lot of outside scenes and everything like that. Yeah, it's very much a prototypical or the standard in heist movies and everything, but it does a good job because as much as the Hays Code kind of pushed, and there was kind of a lightening of it a little bit in the late 40s and early 50s, and this kind of squeaked in because Dick's character, even though he's this big brute, he's also a bit sympathetic. Like he shows kindness to this woman that needs help. She's been kicked out of her place, so he lets her stay in his bedroom and he sleeps on the couch and all that kind of stuff. And they start forming a relationship.
And he doesn't seem to really care about the money.
No. Well, he wants the money, but he wants it because he wants to buy back the family farm.
Right, yeah. But he doesn't seem like he's in it for, like all the other ones are greedy. Like that's ultimately is everybody. Yeah. Everybody would backstab everybody else if they had the chance, but he just wants to do the job and get his family farm back, and basically,
except for Gus. Gus is the stand-up because Gus is the only one who survives.
Right. Yeah.
Well, he survives, and the bookie. And one of the twist on this is that the lawyer convinces the bookie to actually use his money.
Right. Yeah, to keep it quiet. But he has this tell, which is that he sweats profusely when he's worried about money. Right. And that's how the mastermind figures out that there's been this betrayal. That's
why I'm constantly sweating.
Why everyone is constantly sweating.
Fair point.
You also find out earlier that the detective that has kind of been prominent in this is also crooked. Like he's taking kickbacks from people to not bust. Like he goes up to the bookie and says, "Hey, you're going to get raided. I have to do this because the commissioner's on me."
Right.
And it's like, well, I can't do this right now. It's like, all right, just don't be here when we get here.
And part of the press conferences, they've rounded that guy up too as part of the cleaning the streets.
He saw the mastermind Doc there when he came to talk about the raid, and so that's how he puts everything together. And he's like, "Yeah, they might get me, but I'm the guy who just broke like the biggest heist in the city's history.
Right.
So it's going to go well for me either way."
So the production code had problems with this because of what we've talked about, Patrick, was the bad guy cheated justice.
Right.
By offing himself. They thought that wasn't fair, right? They thought that wasn't a good way to show how to get away with it or whatever. And, it's also like you mentioned it was filmed on location. That location was Lexington, Kentucky and Cincinnati, which is to me an odd place to center a film, any film, but especially one named The Asphalt Jungle, which doesn't sound like either.
Yeah, it does sound like definitely like
LA or New York,
center,
right?
Yeah.
But just an interesting side note there. So
the press conference has very Poochie went to his home planet vibes to it.
You see Sterling Hayden float off into the sky on an animation cell.
My favorite part is when the asphalt said, "It truly is an asphalt jungle." I didn't watch the film, obviously.
Well, going back to what Adam says, like all the the planning and everything. Like the main thing though, that because even with the guard, they kind of planned for the guard. That's why Hayden Sterling's character Dix was there.
The muscle, yeah,
because he just like punched the dude once and out.
But he also kills the safecracker that way.
Right.
He punches the dude out, and the guy drops his gun and he shoots his friend in the chest.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the mistake was the gun went off when it hit the floor. That was the
No, the big mistake was that the fact that the explosion to open the safe set off all the
Every
alarms
alarm
on the block.
Yeah.
It does have that heist. It really does feel like all the things that happened in that. So the side plot with because it is convoluted like all these movies are, but the side plot with the lawyer financing it and being the bad guy and the Marilyn Monroe piece and all that, that's all fine. But the heisty part of it, the actual bank or the jewel store robbery where they're breaking open this big vault, that really does all the bad things that happen. Like it was, I didn't know they had this, but they had the laser across the floor, right,
and they keep laying down.
The electronic eye, Adam.
Yeah, electronic eye. Yeah, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that existed in 1950. I mean, that's pretty cool. And just
there was a card at the end that said, "Yes, these things exist."
Attested to by Dr. So and So.
These security measures actually exist.
But that idea. And then you flash forward to Oceans, whatever the one is where the guy has to do the aerobics exercise to get over all the lasers that are moving around.
Yeah.
That's the same thing. It's the same idea.
Entrapment with Catherine Zeta-Jones, ducking.
Better example.
Much better example.
Not only did they have it in 1950, but they apparently had it in 1943 because the dude planned it 7 years before he got busted.
Dude was future-proofing his plans, man. That's how diabolical he was. He was like,
it's also,
they may create electronic eyes in the time it takes us to get this.
I also liked how the last time they're going back under it to get out of the bank that Sterling Hayden, we just cut around him having to. He's like, I'm not going to get on the floor again. He just cut around it. I'll be standing on the other side already.
It's also weird. It's not so high that you couldn't just kind of jump over it. They would do it was.
I wonder if it's a tall laser. Yeah.
They pointed. I mean, it was like a garage door thing. It was that size.
Yeah, I definitely don't limbo under that when I'm trying to get out of the garage.
So anyway, it's just
There's not enough limbo scenes in films.
That's what I'm saying. They need to bring that back.
Josh is just trying to sell his script, limbo, limbo, limbo.
It's the forbidden dance, limbo.
I thought that was lambada.
Well, I'm not a smart man. That's why my screen sold.
I keep telling him if he would switch the soundtrack of that from polka to something else, then he might be able to sell the screenplay.
That's polka limbo. That's the lost film noir.
That is
polka limbo.
All right, so I want to talk about what many consider the foundational and kind of the measuring stick of all film noir, and that is double indemnity.
I killed Dietrichson. Me, Walter Neff, insurance agent, 35 years old, unmarried, no visible scars. Until a while ago, that is. Yeah, I killed him. I killed him for money and for a woman. It all began last May. I was thinking about that dame upstairs and the way she had looked at me. And I wanted to see her again, close, without that silly staircase between us. How could I have known that murder can sometimes smell like honeysuckle?
I can't stand it anymore. What if they do hang me?
They're not going to hang you, baby.
It's better than going on this way.
They're not going to hang you. Because you're going to do it and I'm going to help you.
Yes, from the moment they met, it was murder. Always behind them with his devilish hunches and his brilliant brain was Keyes.
The murder's never perfect. Always comes apart sooner or later. And where two people are concerned, it's usually sooner.
Could they get away from him and his relentless pursuit? And could they get away with murder?
You don't know Keyes. Once he gets his teeth into something, he never lets go. He'll investigate you. He'll have you shot at. He'll watch you every minute from now on. You afraid, baby?
Yes, I'm afraid. But not of Keyes. I'm afraid of us.
I'd like to move in on her right now, tonight. If it wasn't for Norton and his striped pants ideas about company policy, I'd have the cops after her so quick it'd make a head spin. Now, we know the Dietrichson dame is in it and somebody else.
Only haven't got a single thing to go on, Keys.
He'll show. He's got to show. Sometime, somewhere, they've got to meet.
This movie it's really well done. It's got all your great tropes in it. It's told in flashback by Fred McMurray's character. It's got probably like the greatest femme fatale ever in Barbara Stanwyck's character.
Yeah.
Cue the slide whistle.
But it's also got Edward G. Robinson in it.
Right.
Right. Yeah, as the boss.
Yeah, as Josh's favorite character in any movie, an insurance claims investigator.
I certainly want to talk about that because rewatching a lot of these noirs, and there's like insurance adjusters are kind of like second only to the private detective, and having spent decades as an insurance adjuster, I don't know, it kind of brick pits me a little bit because in one, like this insurance adjuster like pulls out like a 45, and I was like, man, they wouldn't even let us wear shorts in the summer, and this guy's got a pistol.
That's why they call it the golden age, man.
Yeah, man. You can just shoot fraudsters.
That's right.
Back then, not only were they allowed to have the pistol, they issued them the pistol, and they kept it right next to the company flask that they were given.
When you get fired, it's like turning your flask and gun.
So the cop turned it in his badge. Like, you're going off the rails there, Fred McMurray. Turn in your flask.
But it's also like a rental car. You have to return the flask full.
That's right. You can take that flask out of my cold, dead hand. You can have my gun.
The story of it is that Fred McMurray is an insurance salesman. And he goes to talk to a man whose auto insurance is about to lapse. And so he's trying to resell him on a policy so that they can keep it going. Because apparently they just didn't mail you forms to sign or something back then. But
look, insurance sales is super competitive. Like all this is completely legit that he would show up at their house.
So what happens is, as he's there, he meets the man's wife, played by Barbara Stanwyck. And she slowly entices him over into a plot to murder her husband. The interesting thing about it is like Fred McMurray's character like sees it like immediately.
Yeah.
And like, no, not going to do that. And then a little fade to black and, come back in laying on the couch like, yeah, we'll kill him.
Why would I put my dirty shoes on your couch?
From there, but
Hays Code says we can't see.
Yeah, I've wondered for years what happened to that.
Barbara Stanwyck's character is like the definitive femme fatale because she is very aggressive sexually toward him, like pursuing him and using the sexuality to, of course, ensnare him into this plot. And so he comes up with the plan. Like he also throws in some additional paperwork for a life insurance policy and then puts in a double indemnity clause, which means that they would pay extra if he dies on like a train.
Right.
He does that because Barbara Stanwyck tells him that her husband is going up to Stanford for a college reunion and he's going to take the train. So they pencil that in. They execute the murder. He takes on the man's clothes and everything, gets on the train with her with him so that there's witnesses to see him off on the train. And then he jumps off the back of the caboose. They plant the body on the train tracks. And step 3, profit.
Right.
And he's telling this story. The framing device is he walks into the office and he goes on Edward G. Robinson, who's like the claims adjuster, and gets on his dictaphone and he's telling the story of what happened. He's giving all this insight into everything that happens to him. It is like really just kind of like this engrossing, again, convoluted plot. Like you find out that she had been the nursemaid for the man's previous wife who was sick. And then she died and then married, Barbara Stanwyck marries him and then gets the money. And, the man has a daughter who's a little bit older and she starts hanging out with Fred McMurray's character. And so he kind of starts seeing everything that's going on. And he has a revelation that she's probably using him, that there's all this sexual tension that she's built up. It's just, all it is bait to get him involved. And she's probably moved on to the girl's boyfriend now. So at the end, he decides to go and kill her to prevent her from getting away with it.
We're both rotten.
Only you're a little more rotten. You got me to take care of your husband for you. And then you get Sacchetti to take care of Lola. Maybe take care of me, too. Then somebody else would have come along to take care of Sacchetti for you. That's the way you operate, isn't it, baby?
Suppose it is. Is what you've got cooked up for tonight any better?
I don't like that music anymore. Mind if I close the window? You can do better than that, can't you, baby? Better try it again. Maybe if I came a little closer. How's this? Think you can do it now? Why didn't you shoot again, baby? Don't tell me it's because you've been in love with me all this time.
No, I never loved you, Walter, not you or anybody else. I'm rotten to the heart. I used you just as you said. That's all you ever meant to me. Until a minute ago, when I couldn't fire that second shot. I never thought that could happen to me.
Sorry, baby, I'm not buying.
I'm not asking you to buy. Just hold me close.
Goodbye, baby.
All the while being afraid that Edward G. Robinson's character is going to find him out. Because he starts picking apart everything that's happening. You know, it's like, this doesn't make sense. Why did he do this when he should have done that and everything else? And in the conflict, he gets shot. And so he's confessing as he's bleeding out. And Edward G. Robinson shows up because the janitor saw him and called him. The last thing you hear is, of course, the sirens coming because they called the police and everything. It's really interesting to watch this if you know anything about Fred MacMurray's career. The reason he took this role is because he was always like the good guy in the films. Like he was the clean do-gooder and all that. And he did it even later after this. You know, he was the father of My Three Sons, like this renowned family sitcom of the late 50s and early 60s and everything. And here he's just playing just the biggest. Like he knows Barbara Stanwyck's married and he's still putting the moves on her from like the beginning.
Yeah.
Cue the wolf whistle.
Yeah. No, they did without that. They were smart enough not to. I actually have my version that I edited one in
with the wolf whistle. It's just you sitting in your living room alone with a wolf whistle.
What I find interesting about the good femme fatales is they do fit that kind of Lady Macbeth.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
often like stoking the ambitions of someone who normally wouldn't, you know, I mean, Fred MacMurray's character is not a great dude, but is he a murderer?
Right.
No.
Not till, you know, what would, it also highlights, you know,
not until they sat on that couch together.
Right. So like the femme fatales often, it's like, oh, see, women are it's kind of seen through that, like women are bad, but it's like, no, dudes are bad because of what they'll do for a Klondike bar. Right. That's the lesson there. Is that, you know, you want to?
We could be together if
you want to fool around.
If this
all you got to do is
out of the way,
sides, and inevitably the dude's like, okay. Where's the go? And then they go, oh no, but, you know, the clarity after, right? Oh my god.
I also love like the kind of cultural shift that we've taken since then, because like after like his second meeting with her, when she's like feeling him out and everything, like to go clear his head, he goes to get a beer at like a drive-in. Like they bring the beer to his car, and he's just sitting there in the car drinking, and it's like, wow.
Wait, is that frowned upon?
In some parts of the world, don't.
Yeah. Like I said, it amazed me, like just like how that struck me, because I have been through a beer barn.
I've been through drive-through
beer places
daiquiri
too,
shops.
Yeah.
And Louisiana, I don't know if any still exists, but they used to just drive. They were like, "They don't drink this while you're driving." Gotcha.
Yes, the whole loophole is when they hand you the daiquiri in just a plain white styrofoam cup
with a straw,
with no labeling on it whatsoever, so no one can tell where you got that plain white styrofoam cup. As long as they hand you the styrofoam and then a straw separately, you're okay. As soon as the straw goes into the drink,
that's when you're in trouble.
How could we have known he was going to drink that?
How could we have known?
It's unimaginable they would have used the straw.
In court, they're like, they were drinking them on the way home? No.
That was a collector's item.
Compound that with the drinking age being 18 back then, and it was just fun times. It was like Death Race 2000 in Louisiana.
They don't do DUI checkpoints. They just pull over random cars and they hit jackpot every time. It's like...
So, like I said, Double Indemnity is probably one of the best film noirs, just in general. Like, it's shot very well. The chemistry between Fred McMurray and Barbara Stanwyck is just fantastic. You can see why sitting on the couch with her would entice him to murder someone, just from how they connect in that film.
Well, and Edward G. Robinson does a really superior performance.
I'm waiting because you said you had thoughts on that. I'm waiting for you to.
That's what I thought. I thought he was really good in that movie. No, just that his I don't know, like his wrath and like disappointment and everything is really drives home the tragedy. It's for Edward G. Robinson, I would say it is a nuanced performance.
Well, yeah, you could tell he has a friendship with Fred McMurray's character. Like, he's trying to convince Fred McMurray to stop being a salesman and to take over his position. And, Fred McMurray, like, no, I make a lot of money doing this. Like, this is, I enjoy it. And, Edward G. Robinson has this nice speech about just how, there's no forethought. Everyone's just, going for that money, just the greed and everything. And that really kind of cements like the underlying issue with McMurray's character, why he gets kind of pulled into that. He's definitely, let's say, goal oriented. He will do whatever he needs to do to get whatever he set his sights on. And that's the main thing that Barbara Stanwyck has preyed upon consistently throughout the film, to get what she wants. Like, they're essentially kind of slightly mirrored on each other, which is why she's so easily able to use him.
Yeah, it's interesting that, like, paired with Postman Always Rings Twice, the James M. Cain stories almost split the genre with detective stories for noir. You have Hammond and Chandler doing all these detective stories, and then on the other side is all these, like, the insurance and like backstabbing twists in like murder schemes for like ill-fated lovers, to the point that it almost feels like every non-detective story is a James M. Cain version of a noir story. It's interesting too, because it makes me think of Carl Reiner, obviously a big noir fan, but that he has in his filmography 2 different noir parody films, and one of them is like the detective stories, the Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid with Steve Martin, getting edited into these classic noir films, and then the other one was the James M. Cain style sexual thrillers with, it was called Fatal Instinct, which was a mixing of the titles of Basic Instinct and Fatal Attraction, because people would confuse them all the time. But one of my favorite details of the premise of that movie is they go so many steps further beyond. He has an insurance that pays well if he gets injured on a train. And it's like, that already seems like weirdly specific. Right. But in Fatal Instinct, it says that his insurance will pay triple if he is shot, falls from a northbound train, and drowns in a freshwater stream.
That's awesome.
They take it to the nth degree in that story.
I don't think the double indemnity, the train thing, really is that out of line. I mean, a lot of people took trains back then,
and
but just having train insurance seems unnecessary unless there were a lot of people getting hit by them at the time.
Well, when they put that title card at the end of the movie, it says train insurance is a real thing.
Every film has a disclaimer for any new inventions mentioned.
I guess it's like the opposite of this is a work of fiction. Right. It doesn't reflect anything real. Like, no, this actually is true.
These animals were harmed in the making.
We went out of our way to harm them.
They weren't even in the script. We added it.
We shot 8 horses for this movie, but there were no horses.
Heaven's Gate. There's like, no, we meant to blow those horses up totally on purpose.
Gotta hit our horse death quota.
We had to blow them up then because if we didn't, the cloud was going to move. We don't know whenever we got that back in the shot. We put double indemnity insurance on them that if they died from dynamite explosions, we get paid twice as much. And that's basically the premise of the producers. Is the producers could have very easily been a noir film. A little bit of insurance fraud. Well, we thank you for joining us today. Even though this is the end of the episode, it's not going to be the end of the conversation. As you may see, this episode runs a little bit long, and we talked even longer about this subject with our special guest, Patrick from Vintage Video. So we decided instead of editing everything down, we're just going to split it into 2 episodes. So our next episode will be the continuation of this discussion on film noir. And we hope you return to listen to us then. In the meantime, check out Patrick's podcast, Vintage Video. You can search for him anywhere podcasts are sold. And you can contact us, as usual, by emailing us at brickedpit@gmail.com. Search for us on Facebook and X, The Bricked Pit Podcast. Or you can leave us a voicemail at podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/brickpit. Until next time.
517?